and you're going to annotate them, identify them, characterize them using the BLAST facility that is inbuilt in ORF Finder, which means ORF Finder is a very special tool. It has BLAST on one hand and it has this power to identify the possible ORFs. Okay, please recall in the BLAST I was talking about 6 frames. I'll be talking about those 6 frames now. So if you had a question, then try to seek answer from the from what I'm trying to basically tell. And if then you have a question, you can ask. So first of all, let us go into the introduction of the ORF Finder. So in the perspective of bioinformatics and genomic analysis, an open reading frame is hereby referred to as, so we are going to now first define our ORF, because ORF can have multiple meanings. For a molecular biologist, ORF is a different thing. It may not be the same thing that we are right now considering. Here in bioinformatics, when I am dealing with a genome, when I am dealing with a long chromosomal DNA sequence, when I am dealing with a contig sequence, which is called as a contiguous sequence, when I'm dealing with a DNA sequence which is running in thousands and thousands of bases or mega bases, I refer ORF to as a continuous stretch of sense codons, CCC, CTA, CGA, you know the codons, genetic codons. So a continuous stretch of sense codons which might be part of a coding region. Those sense codons which might be, note the might be, they may be, they may not be part of a coding region. They are part of a coding region. They could be a part of a gene, or they could be a part of an exon, and thus may encode or be a part of coding DNA, including those sequences which are part of signal peptide. That means very short stretches of amino acids, okay, which are encoded by DNA, but they are not forming a full protein, they are forming a signal peptide. So those small stretches also will be a part of that. We actually include everything which has a continuous stretch of sense codons for a minimum length, okay. Only after that you have a nonsense or a stop codon. Before that you don't have a nonsense or a stop codon, and we consider that stretch as an ORF. You may say, sir, that stretch may be just random. It may be just by chance there. It may not have a meaning. Fine, no problem. But for me, ORF means a stretch of sense. Okay, it may be a coding region, it may be a gene, it may be an exon, it may be something to do with, it may be encoding some signal peptide, no problem. It may not be doing anything, and it may be just random, no problem. Okay, everything for us which is actually a stretch of sense codon is an ORF. Whether it is doing something or not, that is irrelevant. Okay, so ORF Finder is an analytical tool available with NCBI database to locate all putative probable open reading frames in a given contig. Contig is for contiguous, and contiguous means continuous. Okay, so it's a very technical term and key term when you talk about ORFs and all these things. So that's why I have used it. Don't get confused. Contig is short for contiguous, and contiguous means continuous. So continuous, contiguous, contig, same thing, no difference. So in a given contig DNA sequence as obtained during high throughput genomic DNA sequencing. So when you're doing genome sequencing, and when you're using a technique where you have several kilobases or several megabases of DNA coming out as a result of DNA sequencing, okay, when you have this large amount of DNA sequence coming out, in such cases these contiguous or continuous stretches of DNA sequences are subjected to ORF Finder. Why? They are subjected to ORF Finder because this is the earliest information that I would like to know ki with such large contig sequences, what are the possible ORFs this particular contig might be containing, which might be useful for me. So when I'm doing some DNA sequencing, whether it is Sanger dideoxy or some new age high throughput sequencing, where you have in a matter of 6 hours you have gigabases or megabases of DNA coming out, the first thing I want to know is there any ORF this contig is containing? If yes, who are they? because if you have read a small on, if you have gone through bioinformatics, genomics is a very important branch, and in genomics there are 3 steps: structural genomics, functional genomics, and comparative genomics. Structural genomics is basically DNA sequencing. Okay, get the DNA sequenced. Functional genomics is what do they do? Where is the gene? What it does? Where is the gene? What it does? So this functional genomics is very important because we want to know what they are doing. So if you want to know what they are doing, you want to locate the possible ORFs, and we are trying to find out where and what kind of ORF is there in this given content. Now, before jumping into ORF Finder, we have certain things that we should know. Otherwise, you will be lost with the results as to what needs to be done. First of all, ORF Finder works with nucleic acid sequence only. Okay, and that too, you have to have a minimum length. Okay, as of now, you have to have a minimum length of 30 nucleotide bases. Minimum 30 nucleotide bases should be there. You can't work below that. Okay. Secondly, ORF Finder locates ORF in sense and complementary strand. Now, what is sense? When you're doing DNA sequencing, okay, it's very important for especially those who are doing BSc. It's a very important sequence. It's a very important thing. Okay, this sense and antisense and sense and complementary, these are extremely volatile terms. They don't have a strict meaning. Okay, they are very volatile, very relative, very subjective things. Okay, so whatever user provides, computer thinks it has sense, and they give it a conventionally, they give it a code as plus. So whatever you give is sense to the computer, and the complementary of that is the negative strand. So you have a plus strand and a minus strand, and in general we say user provides sense, but that is not true. And frankly speaking, in a large contig where you have thousands and thousands of ORF, okay, those ORFs are not in only just one strand. You all know DNA is double stranded and DNA has genes, fine. But if you are dealing with a very long DNA molecule, something like a molecule which is of chromosomal length, chromosomal DNA molecule, in that chromosomal DNA molecule, all ORF will not be in one strand. They will be randomly placed, sometimes in one strand, sometimes in the other strand. Of course, they will not be exactly opposite to each other, because wherever you have an ORF, the opposite of that will not be an ORF, obviously. But ORFs will be there in both the strands. That is one thing that you should know now, that ORFs, or for that matter gene or coding region or exon, or by whatever name you call it, they are there randomly placed in either of the strand, and that is how it is. But what happens is, when you're doing DNA sequencing, the sequencing reaction is such that it is always single strand of DNA that you get as a result. Because DNA sequencing is not a two-sided reaction. It's a single direction reaction, especially when you're doing a high throughput reaction. So you don't get the complementary sequence, and you don't actually need it. You all know A pairs with T, G pairs with C. So that way you don't actually need the complementary strand, and you always get single strand. NCBI, GenBank, all these databases, DDBJ, all these databases, they just have single strand of DNA. Okay, you report a single strand, you download a single strand, you work with a single strand, you align single strands, you always work with single strand in bioinformatics. Because the second strand I can make, computer can make, so no need to all that. But you have to remember that you are dealing with a single strand. And I just told you, ORF can be randomly in either of the strand. You got the point? So when the ORF can be in either of the strand randomly, especially when you're working with something like a chromosomal DNA molecule, you need to have a complementary strand. But don't worry, you don't have to provide that. The system will make a complementary. And as I told you, what you give is plus, and what they make out of it, the complementary one, is minus. Okay, so that is how it is. That is what you need to remember. I hope you got this point. Then the second point is DNA sequence databases to have single strand. I just told you all DNA sequence database, they will give you single strand. The FASTA that you saw is a single strand. Whether it was sense or anti-sense, it is irrelevant. It is irrelevant. Okay. It is obvious that in a large context, I told you that in a large continuous stretch of DNA, there will be multiple ORFs, sometimes in one and sometime in other. But at a time, you only have one strand because that is how it is. The sequencing reaction will proceed in one direction. You will have only one strand. You will get a single strand. If you go to the database, you will get a single strand from them. And that way, you might lose information on the ORF that might be there in the other strand if you don't account for that. So you have to account for that. But don't worry. You don't have to worry. The system will do it. Okay, so ORF Finder will give you option to select which codon system you want to use. So there are standard ones, okay, and then there are alternative genetic codons, which are there in mitochondria, which are there in chloroplast, are there in bacteria, in some cases viruses. So you know, in prokaryotic systems and in archaebacteria systems, you have alternative genetic codon systems where some codons are encoded, some codons actually encode a different amino acid. But normally in a normal world, we always use standard genetic codon. So it gives you that option. And then you have other filters and variables which you can choose, like minimum nucleotide length, which you desire to be qualified as an ORF. That means what is that minimum length that you qualify as ORF? That means it is up to you. Okay, if you want to say, okay, whatever is less than 50 is not an ORF for me, the system will remove that. If you say no, whatever is 30 and above, if it is a continuous stretch of sense codon, I will call it ORF, fine. System will work like that. So there are very good variables and filters that you can choose. Then you have selection of range coordinates. Range coordinate means if you have a very long sequence and you just want to focus on a very small coordinate, you want to work from 1 to 1000 or 500th base to 1000th base, you want to only focus on a small region, you can do that. You can select a range coordinate to selectively search within a given sequence, and that way you can actually minimize your work. If you have a large sequence and you don't want to go crazy, working with 10,000 ORFs which are present in 1 gigabase of chromosome molecule, don't do that. Simply just say, okay, from 1 to 1000 bases, how many ORF are there? Then you can go from 1001 to 2000 and so on and so forth. You can, that way you can chop your work into small pieces. Then you can ignore nested ORFs. Nested ORF means an ORF within an ORF. So it is possible. Imagine there is a 100 base continuous stretch not having stop codons in a given frame. Okay, it is possible that within that 100 you have some other smaller ORFs, okay, which may or may not be actually encoding, but technically speaking they are ORF. Because if you have selected the minimum length of nucleotide which is qualified as an ORF as 30, then anything which has 100, anything which is 100 base pair long and is an ORF will automatically have one as 30 and one as 50. So you have nested ORFs, ORF within an ORF. You can ignore that if you want. So these are the features that ORF Finder gives you. Another very important aspect that you need to know is basically the frame thing. Okay, so please remember when I was talking about BLAST, during my BLAST discussion, I was telling you 6 frames. There are a DNA molecule can have 6 frames of proteins. You can have 6 frames in which amino acid sequence will be there. What are those 6 frames? Okay, so that is this particular part. Possible frames in which ORF can exist in a given strand of DNA. In a given sequence, which is single strand, of course, there can be 3 possible frames in which the codons can be read. These 3 frames are called as frame plus 1, frame plus 2, and frame plus 3. इनको by default हम नाम देते हैं +1, +2, +3. Okay. For instance, consider this sequence. So you have a sequence ATG, GTG, GAG, CCC, CAT, CGA, CAA, AAA, GGG. It's a random sequence that I have made out. The first frame will be when first base of the sequence is the first base of the first codon. That means I am basically, considering that this particular sequence starting from A is basically also the first base of the first codon. That means this is first codon, then this is second codon, then this is third codon. I hope you can see the pen running on the screen. Then third codon, fourth codon, fifth codon, and so on. Okay, sixth codon, sorry, something happened. Okay, sixth codon, then seventh codon, and so on. This is called as first frame. But then there is a possibility when we ignore the first base. So we have ignored the first. So this A is now ignored. Now we ignore this. And we say the second base, that is T, second base is the first base of the first codon. That means now the first codon is TGG, TGG, AGC, CCC, ATC. That means we have ignored the first base. Then you have third frame, where you have ignored the first two bases, A and T. You have ignored it, okay, and now you are working with the remaining ones. That means the third base is now the first base of the first codon, GGT, GGA, GCC, CCA, TCG, ACA, AAA, and so on. So when you have in this manner these three possible frames, you may think, going like this, can there be a fourth frame? Can you have a fourth frame? No, because if you go for omitting the third base also, let's say right now what you have done is you have ignored A, then you ignored T. If now you ignore G, so if you ignore G and you consider fourth base as the first base of first codon, you actually are in frame 1 only. You are in frame 1 minus the first codon. So what is first frame is also the fourth frame. What is second frame is also fifth frame, and the third frame is also sixth frame. So technically speaking, for a given single strand, there can only be 3 frames. But as I told you, ORFs exist in either of the strand. In a long stretch of DNA, ORF can exist in either of the strand, and that is the reason why you provide one strand, we call it sense, and we denote it as plus. That will have 3. The complementary one created by the computer will also have like this 3. So 3 plus 3, it makes it 6. Okay, you got it. So 3 plus 3 makes it 6 because you provided one strand. Computer made 3 frames out of it because computer also doesn't know. We also don't know in which particular frame the ORF will be existing, and that is why computer is going for a full screening. So for screening, it is considering possible 3 frames in plus strand and possible 3 frames in minus strand, and that way there are total of 6 frames. Okay. So once the ORF finder screening is over, the results will be displayed as the ORF that is obtained in different frames, their length, their possible match from the blast/smart blast hit that is integrated with it. That means you will not only get the possible ORF, you will also get to know in which frame it was found, what is their possible, what was its length, what is it possible matches to, that means what is its identity, what it actually relates to, from which organism it is very close, and so on and so forth. Okay, so ORF finder is integrated with BLAST tool for characterization of putative ORFs using sequence similarity matching and homology searches, as we have done with BLAST. In this manner, ORF finder not only helps you in locating the ORF in different frames, it can also establish their possible identity, character, annotation using BLAST-based search. Okay, so to do this, you have to basically go to the NCBI website, same site, and you have to go to resource list. Under resource list, you have to go to O for open reading frame, and under O, you will find open reading frame finder. Okay, you open that, you will come to the ORF finder homepage. So this is the ORF finder homepage. This is about the ORF finder, what is the version and what they are doing, what new features are there. This is the portion where you paste the sequence, very much like BLAST. You have to paste your sequence, or you have to put the accession number in FASTA format. That means sign of greater than with followed by a unique character, no space, then enter, then entire sequence. This is basically if you want to work within a range only. If you have a very long sequence, you want to work only in a particular frame or particular range, you have to say from this to this only I want to work. Then you have options here, minimum ORF length. That means what is the minimum length that you qualify as ORF. If you click 30, then 30 is the ORF, that is the minimum. If you click 50, then 50, 75, and so on. Then genetic codon that you want to choose. So you want to go for a standard genetic codon, or you want to go for alternative ones, mitochondrial, bacterial, viral, and so on and so forth. That will be there. Then you have pasted the sequence, put the values. Okay, so I have clicked ATG only. That means only the ATG. In other words, if it is RNA, AUG. You all know initiation codon is AUG. So I have selected ATG or AUG as my start codon. That means only that stretch which starts with AUG or ATG is only considered as ORF. But you can have the other option, ATG and alternative initiation codons. That means ATG and other codons which are considered initiation. Or you can also go for a very general, feature where you will say any codon which is sense codon, okay, from where a sense codon stretch is starting will be considered as ORF. That means whenever there is a stop codon, after that, whenever you have a continuous stretch of sense codons, whether it is beginning from AUG or any other, will be considered as ORF. If you click that, you will get all the ORFs. But I have kept it very tight. I have said 30 is the minimum length, standard codon I will use, and only AUG is the codon that I want to see how many ORF are starting with AUG. And then I have clicked ignore nested ORF and I click submit. Okay, it will take some time. It will take some time and tell you how many ORFs have been found and what is the length I am working on, from 1 to 340 nucleotide I am working, and so on. And now you will get this result. This is the result page of ORF Finder Viewer, where it will tell you the number of ORFs found. So in my case, only 2 ORFs were found. Genetic codon standard, start codon ATG, these are my choice. Nested ORF removed. ORFs were calculated on an interval from 1 to 30. That means from the entire sequence, I chose only 1 to 340. After that, I just said, no, I don't want to see. So within that interval, okay, these 2 ORFs were selected, were found. Out of this, when I clicked on ORF2, it showed me the sequence of the ORF. The sequence of ORF is like this: methionine, asparagine, tyrosine, lysine, okay, RRR, arginine, serine, aspartic acid, and so on, then serine, and so on. This is the amino acid sequence of the ORF that is found. Okay, it was found on the negative strand. Negative strand means the one which was made by the computer, okay, which was complementary to what I provided. That means negative strand, complementary strand. Frame 3, that means third frame. I told you what is frame 3. Frame 3 means when the third base from the start is considered as the first base of the first codon, that is frame 3. So what I gave complementary to that, and in that third frame, okay, and in the third frame the start codon was at 131 base pair, okay, and then after this length there were more than 3 subcodons, and the length was 129 nucleotide ending, which is converted into 42 amino acids. So there are 42 amino acids in this particular ORF. Similarly, in the case of ORF1, negative strand, first frame, okay, starting 202, stopping 152, 51 length, and 16 amino acid. So 51 is the length of the DNA, and divide by 3, that is 16, because the last one will be basically subcodon, and that is another ORF that is found. Now, if I want to basically know who is this ORF, what it does, to whom it belongs to, simply click on that particular ORF, and then you have to hit BLAST or Smart Blast. It's an integrated facility with the ORF. You can directly go for blasting this particular ORF. You click on BLAST or Smart Blast, you'll be taken to BLAST-P, where your ORF will be matched to existing reference sequence in the database. And if this ORF is actually doing something or has been reported or a similar one has been reported in database, you will get to know what are the possible, reference sequences which are there in the database, which are highly similar to your ORF, and from where they have been reported, what are they doing, you will get to know. So once you are done with this particular page and you hit the blast, you actually go into blast. Okay, you know the blast. In the case of when you go into the blast, you will know okay, now this is the result and the ORF is probably doing this. But remember, the score, the e-value, the percentage identity, the query coverage, all these this will matter, because it is not that key always the ORFs will be doing something. Okay, it is not that every ORF will be doing something. It is actually sometimes you get an ORF which is just randomly there. It is there but not doing anything, or it has not been reported as to what it does. Okay, so the strength of ORF Finder, strength of BLAST, it lies in the number of reference sequences which are there in database. If database is poor, your BLAST result will not be very significant. It will not be very good in terms of e-value, and the score will be very low confidence. And that will tell you that you are working with either something new, or you are working with something very common, but the database is not rich in that. And that basically is all about the ORF Finder. And basically you have to interpret the results in terms of how many ORF you got, on which strand you got, what was the length, in which frame they were there, what was the optimum length, how many amino acids they were encoding, and finally what was the BLAST result saying. If the BLAST result says nothing found similar, that means either that ORF is novel, it has not been reported, or that is just there by chance and it actually has no function. Okay, so well, with that I am done with my presentation. I convey my heartfelt gratitude to Dr. Ruchi Veer, Assistant Professor in Botany, Zakir Hussain, Delhi College, for inviting me to this national workshop on bioinformatics. I deeply thank the entire workshop organizing team of the Department of Botany, Zakir Hussain College, and also a big thank you for remembering me, and thank you to all faculty members of Botany Department. I remember each and every one of you, and I just pray that all is good there and you're doing well. And really thank you so much for giving me your time and inviting me to this workshop. And now I can take any question if there is any question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Prashant Pant, for this really comprehensive account of the two important concepts in bioinformatics, that are your ORF Finder and BLAST. I would like to have some question. I would like to ask some question from you, Dr. Prashant. And first of all, there are certain questions on the first session, that is the BLAST. First question is, what does 6-frame translation of nucleotide means in T-BLAST?
Actually, ma'am, the audio was lost. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah.
I was lost in the audio.
Yeah. Is it clear now? The audio is clear now?
Now it is clear. Yes, now it is clear.
So what does 6-frame translation of nucleotide means in BLAST?
Okay. So basically, you have DNA database, DNA sequence database, or simply speaking, nucleotide database. Okay. So sometimes it happens that you have a sequence, you have a query sequence which is not matching to the DNA databases. That means I have a query which is DNA molecule, but it is not matching to anything in the DNA database. So I might think that it's a novel sequence. It has not been reported, but that is not the case here, or it may not be the case here. It is very possible that somebody who is into proteomics, who is into protein sciences and protein sequencing, they might have reported the protein sequence, okay, which is there, but because I have the DNA sequence, because of which I am not able to find the match that we want to cross over. So whether it is BLAST10 or TBLAST10 or BLASTX or any other form of BLAST other than BLAST NNP, we are trying to do a crossover. So now coming to the question, what TBLASTX means and what is the meaning of converting a nucleotide database into a conceptual protein translation, protein sequence database. It basically means you want to cross over whatever is there in the form of nucleic acids. You basically treat that nucleic acid sequence as coding region, and what you do is you simply convert that DNA into possible translational product if that DNA was subjected to translation, as if the DNA was subject to translation. That means if you have a DNA sequence, you simply translate it, whether it is ending with sense codons or nonsense codons, whether it is actually having something in them, you simply convert that DNA into the protein message. We all know, DNA basically undergoes transcription to make RNA, and RNA gives you the translation and you have protein. Now this DNA to RNA to protein, we know that. So we want to basically convert this message that is there in form of protein hidden in the DNA, convert it to the actual amino acid sequence. Now that actual amino acid sequence may have some message, it may be completely nonsense, but I want to cross over. It is the idea of crossover which makes us convert the reference sequence database into a conceptual protein translation. So every time I do TBLASTX, or if I want to do TBLAST10, what I am doing is I am converting either the query or the subject into protein. Now you may ask, why not do the other way around? Why not convert the protein into DNA? That is not possible, because you have something called as codon degeneracy. Codon degeneracy will mean that while CCA and CCG and CCC and CCT, all four codons will code for amino acid proline, the reverse is not true. So if the query is proline, it cannot say that it is CCA and CCA. It can be CCA or CCT or CCG or CCC or CC some other nucleotide. The point is that you can only go in one direction from DNA to protein. So it is something where I can leverage this, this knowledge that I can convert the DNA into putative possible protein translational product, which may be, having some information or not. But my idea is to cross it over. That means I have a query not matching to DNA. Let us go and seek into what is there in the protein level. Do I have information? So these types of changes are required to be done when you want to confirm whether it is a novel sequence or not, or whether it has been reported earlier or not. I hope I am clear.
Yeah, all right. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Prashant. The next question goes that, does BLAST use global alignment or local alignment?
Actually, BLAST is mainly for local alignment, but there is a BIGAST also, which is basically basic global alignment search tool also. So you have a version. You have a version of BLAST where you don't use local alignment, you use a global alignment, but that is another version, and that you do very selectively when you have a query and you have a subject. So when you have the query and you have the subject and you want to see how they do, how do they perform and how do they score when you go for a complete head-to-head alignment from start to stop. So when you want to see start to stop full overall length over the entire sequence length, you go for BIGAST, but that is done usually by those people who have both the query and subject with them. Okay, so somebody who is doing a pairwise alignment between a known query and a known subject, they want to do BIGAST. But normally in majority of cases, we go for BLAST. But BLAST per se uses local alignment.
Thank you, sir. Next question is, how about the authenticity of the data that we obtain with these bioinformatic tools? And can we have different conclusions by wet lab results?
Okay, so part one is authenticity and part two is wet lab confirmation. Okay, so part one authenticity. See, bioinformatics is not the answer. It is a great facilitator of what you are intending to do, what you are trying to do, and what you are going to get. But it is not that whatever we are getting here is the final result or is the final authentic conclusion that we can draw. These are inferences. These are interpretations, inferences, and trends that we actually conclude, which needs to be verified at the wet lab level. So we are not bypassing wet lab. We are not saying that wet lab is not required. Wet lab is required, but using bioinformatics, it will help us save time, resources, and it will save a lot of energy also, because these days we are working in constrained environments of constrained resources. So bioinformatics is more like a helper and facilitator to basically do a guided research in a particular direction where chances of having a misfire or a negative result are lesser and lesser. But you can't really say that this is the answer to everything or this is what it is. It is not that. You have to supplement your conclusions eventually through wet lab only.
Thank you, sir. Next question is, why do we need to work with sequences on Notepad?
It's a very good question, actually. All of you who have tried to, when teachers gave you assignments, so what you do, you don't do, and you basically copy paste Wikipedia. Okay, so you have noted then when you copy paste Wikipedia or you go to internet and you find a particular information, you copy the entire page and paste on Microsoft Word. What happens? When you paste directly from internet any assignment note to Microsoft Word, the entire formatting goes. Okay, you will spend 3 hours, 4 hours correcting the formatting, but you will never get the hang of it. And what will happen is that there will be tabs, there will be enter commands and so many other commands that your assignment will never look neat and clean as it was on Wikipedia or any other website. The reason is ghost commands. These are basically embedded commands in the web page, which are there. You can't see them, but if you basically switch on a particular button which basically enables you to see the hidden commands, you will see there are tabs, there are commands within them. So to remove all those things, you simply have to copy the file or copy the sequence and paste it in Notepad, TextPad, or any other similar program. It simply does not understand or does not recognize these hidden commands. So I am trying to basically also tell you at the same time that when next time your teacher gives you assignment, you copy paste Wikipedia into Notepad. That way your ghost commands will be gone. You will have a neat, clean formatting, and you can then present the data as if it was yours. So I actually am helping you cheat now, because you can get rid of these ghost commands only in the Notepad. So if you're copy pasting the sequence from NCBI web page to Word, what will happen is these ghost commands will not allow you to basically go for sequence alignment or blast your results or do any cluster W, or even in Mega it will create a lot of problems. So it is basically the problems because of the hidden commands, because of which you don't want to work with Word. Go for Notepad, rich text format, RichPad, whatever is available, which is a very basic Word processor.
Thank you, Dr. Piyush.
Yeah.
Next question. Yeah, sir. The next question is, how to do blast search with unknown random sequences without having accession number?
You don't need accession number. I think if I have got the answer right, if you have the sequence, see, if you have the sequence with you, no matter how long it is, even if it is 10 base pair long, no problem. Okay, so if you have the sequence, whether it is protein or DNA, you don't need accession numbers. Accession numbers will be given to you as a result of the hit table. So you don't need accession number if you have the sequence. If you don't have the sequence, then you have to go for sequence retrieval in the NCBI database. So what I'm trying to basically say is that if you have a query DNA or query protein sequence, you don't need accession number. You will be given a hit table where you will have lots of accession numbers you can choose from. which are the close relatives of your query sequence. Number one. Number two, if you don't have the query DNA and you want to have a query DNA or query protein, then you have to go for sequence retrieval, and for that you have to go to the website, NCBI or EMBL, DDBJ, whatever you are comfortable with, and then you have to search for a particular gene of a particular organism. Okay, so you have to have some direction as to which gene, which organism, which particular domain I am targeting, and then you have to retrieve the sequences, and those sequences which are there in database can be used as a query sequence, basically to learn how to basically work with BLAST. But in a normal world, a query should be something which is an unknown sequence identified or sequenced by you or by your group or given to you by your teacher, which needs to be applied or subjected to BLAST analysis to know who is this and to what organism it belongs to and what function it does. So accession number, don't worry. If you don't have it, just go to Genbank database and you will get accession numbers.
The last question for this session on BLAST is, what if in the BLAST results we don't find a sequence that is similar to our sequence or our query sequence?
Yeah, Tabassum ma'am, I lost the question, some audio issue.
The question was that can it be like that in BLAST results we don't find a sequence that is having homology with our sequence?
Yeah, it is possible. It is possible, and if that happens, you should actually throw a party, because it is quite possible that ma'am, if you hit upon a sequence which is actually coming from a good sequencing machine and it is not finding any match, then congratulations, you have hit upon a sequence which is novel. And in these days, when like more than 1,000 genomes have been sequenced, even after that, if you find a sequence which is not finding any significant match found, then probably some award is in your way. I mean, you are going to report something very novel. So that is something very good in a way. But yes, it has happened. It has happened that sometimes you find no significant match found, and in most cases the reason is there are some PCR based artifacts or DNA sequencing error, because of which the sequence is a chimeric sequence. Chimeric sequence? A chimeric sequence is when, because of PCR Taq polymerase error or DNA sequencing error, you have come up with a sequence. It is usually a machine error, where what has happened is two different sequences have been sequenced and ligated. So you have a sequence which is half something and half something. It is usually a DNA polymerase error. Sometimes it is a sequencing error also, and it happens commonly in those cases when a person is doing metagenomic study. So when you are working with environmental sample, soil or water or something like that, and when you are working with community DNA of a particular community, where you have plant, animal, bacteria, insect, everything in the same tube. So then what happens, sometimes Taq polymerase does a mistake where they make a strand out of multiple parents. That is called as a chimeric strand. If that is sequenced, you will get a sequence which will have no significant match found, obviously, because it is half something else, and something else. In that case, you have found an artifact. You need to verify that and eventually decide whether it is artifact or actually a novel sequence. So that is a subject of study, subject of research actually. You need to find, but usually it is that chimeric thing.
Thank you, Dr. Prashant. Some questions from the ORF session goes like, why nested ORF should be removed?
No, it is not like that. It is not removed. I said, as a beginner, you can go for ignoring nested ORFs, because nested ORF will simply pile up your data. It will be like, because, an ORF is an ORF, but it may happen that around the ORF, you have extra stretch of sense codon. So to minimize confusion and to basically discreetly look at ORFs as if they are standalone ORFs, to do that, we go for ignoring the nested ORFs. But for a researcher who is into functional genomics, who is basically screening a large sequence, large contiguous sequence, they do not ignore, and they try to basically dissect and tease out each and every ORF, because you never know which ORF will actually be useful. And sometimes smaller ORFs, which are actually nested, are actually the ones which are coding for signal peptides. So if a person is into deep genomics, they will not be ignoring it. But as a beginner, you can ignore it, just to to have a discrete look, just to focus on a particular region.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. Then next question is, what is the standard ORF length that is used, and how the length would affect the results?
Okay, good question. Actually, there was a time, I remember, around 6 or 7 years back. At that time, ORF Finder was so much customized that we could have actually gone below 30. But now it is having minimum ORF length is 30 nucleotides. So if you divide 30 by 3, because every codon is 3 bases, 30 by 3 is 10. That means nowadays ORF Finder is considering amino acid 10 amino acid sequence of 10 amino acids, or that way 30 bases as a standard length of ORF. But there was a time when we had gone up to 15 or 17. Even today, I believe you can customize or you can actually go for special request key. You want to screen something below 30. So to answer the question, 30 is the minimum length right now. And how will it affect? Actually, higher the ORF length you select, what will happen is the smaller ones, which might be unique, novel, or might be doing something, you will ignore. But if you are targeting a particular gene, or you're targeting a particular exon of a particular gene, where you know that exon exists in at least this much length, which is quite big enough, in that case, to minimize the effort for your own convenience, you can actually go to a minimum length of ORF, something like 75 or 120. So basically, it is the user's choice. Okay, so it is the user who is basically deciding it, because they are working on a particular gene and they want to minimize the noise or the clutter that might come with a smaller length. Okay, but if you are working for the first time and you are curious enough and you are brave enough to basically deal with all possible ORFs that are there in the contig, you can go for a smaller version also. That is there. But usually, what happens is, if you are going below 30, people will say it's hardly 30. You can do it by your own eyes also. So usually 30 se niche jana is not really recommended. But sometimes when people are working with signal peptides, they will go beyond 30, because for them even 2 or 3 amino acids make all the difference. But it is mainly basically depending upon the user.
Okay, I think we can go for this one last question. There are many questions that are there, but due to time constraint, we will not be able to take each and every question. So the last question for the session will be, does every gene has an ORF?
It's a very trick question. Does every gene has an ORF? Gene is, if there's a gene which has no intron, okay, if there is a gene which has no intron, then the gene is an ORF. But if the gene is existing in parts, split gene concept, and it has multiple exons where there are introns and non-coding areas in between, then every exon will have an ORF, and it is possible that hypothetically each exon might be having more than one ORF. Hypothetically, they may not be doing anything. But if you have a gene which is a prokaryotic gene with no intron in between them, then that entire gene is an ORF.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Dr. Prashant, for this really interesting and engaging session. And we learned a lot from this. And I'm sure the participants, we have a lot of appreciation that is coming on the group. So I will be communicating it with you later on. And there are certain students who want to get in touch with you. So I mean, we can share your email ID with those students.
Sure, ma'am. Sure.
Okay, thank you. And before handing over the mic to Dr. Wahid Ansari for a formal vote of thanks, I would like to just announce for the participants that we have circulated a form which requires to confirm your credentials that are to be printed on the certificates. So kindly those who have submitted, they can ignore, but those who have not submitted it yet, kindly submit it duly filled, maybe today only. And please, all of you, it is very important that whatever name of the institute is there, you should write it clear in block letters so that it is not wrongly printed in your certificates. Thank you so much, Dr. Prashant,
Thank you.
again, for this wonderful session and wonderfully and well explained answers to the questions of the participant. Over to you, Dr. Wahid.
Thank you, Dr. Tabassum. Now, on behalf of organizing committee, I would like to take the opportunity to propose a vote of thanks. I would like to extend special thanks to Dr. Prashant Pant for a very informative and wonderful lecture. Dr. Prashant, your depth of understanding on blast-based nucleic acid and protein sequences, identification and characterizations, and locating ORFs in a given nucleotide sequence, and your ability to present the subject in an interesting way is remarkable. I am very much sure all the participants are benefited from your lecture. It was very interesting to hear about how does BLAST work, how many types of blasts are, and how can we perform basic BLAST, BLAST N and BLAST P. The slide you showed gave us really a close look at the current application of BLAST. How can a BLAST save a lot of wet lab and tedious processes, and also locating RF finders, possible frame in which ORFs exist, and how does it integrate with BLAST tools. Once again, we are grateful to Dr. Prashant for the time and effort you took to share your thoughts and experiences with us. We are also thankful to all the participants for patiently listening to the lecture. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, White sir. Thank you so much.
Welcome.